Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, Mysterious Voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today it is Short Story Tuesday, so I wanted to focus on a short story that has interested me as of late. It is a short story from an author that I've talked about on this channel before, probably one of my favorite science fiction writers, and it is a short story about an invasion. I am referring to The Hanging Stranger, which was written by Philip K. Dick and published in 1953. I've talked about Philip K. Dick on this channel before, so I don't need to go into too much detail. I urge you to go check out the other videos that I've made about his work, including The Adjustment Team and We Can Remember It For You Wholesale, as well as The Gun, which was pretty high quality. But Philip K. Dick is a science fiction writer, very well regarded. A lot of his works have been adapted in some way. Even this short story was adapted in a TV series that came out in about 2017 that adapted many of his short stories. But others have been adapted into movies and whatnot. And he's well known for writing about science fiction related things or aliens. Sometimes dipping into horror, which you'll see in the short story that I'm talking about today. He had a number of collections published as well as solitary books. But a lot of his earlier work, which you see in the short story that I'm talking about today, was actually published in a sort of a comic pulp series. Where he got some of his early work published and just getting his name out there initially, which seemed to work for him because he would eventually, generate much wider acclaim. So always an interesting time talking about Philip K. Dick. Without further ado, let's talk about this particular short story. I will do a summary, a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. So The Hanging Stranger focuses on Ed Loyce. He is a family man and a store owner. At the start of the story, he's finishing up digging the foundation for the basement of his home. That his wife had requested, and so when he goes back to the store to work there at night, he discovers a hanging body on a lamppost. And when he asks his friends about it, they say, "Oh, I guess it belongs there." Nobody said anything about it, and only Ed, seems to feel any fear, any shock about what he is seeing. When the police show up, because he's caused a bit of a public disturbance at this point, the police say that it's done nothing, that there's nothing wrong, and they decide to take him in. Although Ed immediately senses something's wrong, because as a business owner, he knows the police in this town, and so he just jumps out of the car and starts to run away. He also runs down in the direction of City Hall, and when he gets there, he sees sort of a portal with people entering and giant bugs coming out, like huge, enormous bugs, and it seems like an alien invasion has taken place, at least according to from Ed's perspective. So he runs away, gets on a bus, and immediately feels a bit of paranoia because he doesn't know who is normal and who is one of these sort of bug strangers who is just wearing human skin at this point. And when two people begin to suspect him and start walking towards him, he jumps off the bus and runs home, where he gets to his family and is like, "We got to get out of here. This is a terrifying situation." And he tells his family to get packed and get ready to leave. But unfortunately, he discovers that his son has become one of these bug creatures. And so Ed has no choice but to kill this bug creature, which is really horrifying when you think about it. And he senses that his other family members have become these bug creatures as well. So he runs outside and crawls and scurries and kind of creeps his way out of town, eventually getting to a farmer And the farmer asks him questions about what's going on, eventually referring him to a police commissioner. And the commissioner is like, I believe your story. Let's talk about this. In a bit of a hilarious moment, the police commissioner says, oh, this is referenced in the Hebrew Bible. So the Hebrews were trying to warn us about this, which is deeply funny because why would the Hebrews be warning us about giant bugs of all things? But it's certainly an interpretation there. And then the police commissioner is like, okay, we gotta go do something about this. When Ed gets outside, he realizes that somebody had to put the body up in the first place. And it was kind of meant as a warning or as a bait to others. And at that point, it's too late for Ed. He realizes that he is now going to be the next sacrifice, and indeed he is. He's hung up. The police commissioner smiles coldly, and it's presumed that Ed dies. And then, as the story comes to an end, a new person shows up who apparently hasn't been taken over by the bugs, and sees Ed's body just lying there in the wind, wondering, why isn't anyone doing anything about that? And that's where the story ends there. In terms of analysis, there's a little bit worth talking about with the hanging stranger. One of the themes that Philip K. Dick is working with seems like to be one of the main theme is the classic invasion theme, where Ed is now an outcast in his own town as he begins to realize that everyone else has been replaced by something far more sinister. Only Ed seems to care about this hanging body. That's the first event that happens to Ed. He looks around and nobody else seems to care. He asks his friends, and he mentions it to the police, but they're like, oh, we're taking care of it. This is supposed to be there, and Ed is confused because normally you don't see hanging bodies in public, and he wonders I was down in a basement all day. Maybe this is supposed to be there. Maybe this is a part of something that's happening. But I don't know. I'm clueless about this, which only stands to get him attention drawn to him by pointing it out. But there is an interesting quote about the hanging stranger that I would like to read to you. There it is. How the hell long has it been there? His voice rose excitedly. What's wrong with everybody? They just walk past. Don Ferguson lit a cigarette slowly. Take it easy, old man. There must be a good reason, or it wouldn't be there. A reason? What kind of reason? And from there, it kind of elaborates, but I really like that quote because it gets at the fact that this is bait, and once you read the story, it's bait, so that it's supposed to attract people like Ed, but there has to be some sort of reason that it's there. Also, kind of getting at the bystander effect, which Philip K. Dick probably didn't intend, but it kind of highlights, there's this weird thing in public, surely somebody would have done something about it already if it didn't belong there, so everyone's just going to walk past it and do nothing about it. And everyone in the story seems to be replaced. It's possible that Ed's friends at the beginning of the story weren't replaced, but knew that something was off and didn't want to say anything about it. And Ed's the only stupid person who decided to say anything about it. And there are also biblical references here, adding to the invasion theme, of sort of Beelzebub and the old cities that were destroyed, and the indication being that the people of those times saw that the giant bugs were kind of taking over the world, and they set about destroying them in any way that they can. Not only is this happening now, but it's happened in the past, and it's kind of a legacy of humanity to deal with these strange outside creatures. And unfortunately, adding to the invasion theme, you have the fact that Ed is killed and used as bait for someone else to come along, that this is going to continue to happen until someone much larger is made aware of the problem, maybe the president or something. But it appears that this invasion is actually working, which is really interesting. But I do think that something to remember is the time period in which this was made. This was published in 1953, and what was going on in America at that time. what would cause us to fear, the outside world, the foreigners? Because you see a lot of sort of invasion stories happening at that time, and I think the answer you might be getting at, you might be thinking about this already, is the Red Scare, where after 1945, the Cold War began between the United States and Russia, and so there was this fear that communists were coming into our communities and slowly trying to replace people so that they could replace the good system of capitalism with what they had over there in Russia. You see a little bit of that in the story, with the fear of replacement, the fear of outsiders coming in and taking over. So I do think that's important to consider in the context of the story. This might be a little bit of anti-communist propaganda written at the time, because it certainly doesn't it doesn't sort of indicate anything other than a fear of foreigners out there. Not that it's not good. It's just there is that element of xenophobia underlying this story, given the time period. Another idea that Philip K. Dick is really good at writing about here is that of fear. Dick is great at capturing Ed increasing horror over this story, where at first he's kind of confused about the hanging body, and then, what's the deal with the police not actually being police officers? What's going on in this community? And then the growing biblical terror as he sees the city hall being replaced and the giant bugs coming in and out of there, wearing human suits, and finding out that his family has been replaced by these creatures, and ultimately that this has been going on for all of humanity. It's leaving Ed with a sense of great terror and great horror that Dick is really great at capturing. Just the utter panic of having to sneak through town and make sure that nobody sees him, and that you can't really trust anyone you come across. Highlighting how great that fear is the fact that Dick writes Ed as just straight up killing his son as soon as he turns into the creature. Doesn't even question it. He's so far gone at this point, so filled with fear and just utter horror at what these creatures are doing to the town, that he kills his son and then runs away and doesn't communicate with anyone outside of the police commissioner, which unfortunately is another bad choice on Ed's part. So I really like that Dick is good at capturing the horror here. The one issue that I have with this story is that I feel that it is a little too overt with its messaging. Dick could have done a better job of making these fears a little bit covert, a little bit under the surface, and only bringing them up when you get to those points where Ed is feeling just outside of his own mind kind of fear. And I do have a feeling that it is a product of its own time period, where Dick is clearly saying, communism is bad, communism is scary, don't let it invade your town at all. As I'm sure other writers were doing at the time. Not all of them, but many of them were trying to capture this Red Scare and this communist paranoia that was filling the 1950s, and unfortunately this story is kind of one of those casualties of that. Anyway, so those are my thoughts on The Hanging Stranger by Philip K. Dick. It's an okay short story, not Philip K. Dick's best, and unfortunately a victim of the time period where it was written, as I noted previously. But I still recommend that you go check it out. I'll put a link to it in the description, because it's always important to read Philip K. Dick's works, so you can see their influences in the present. I always like seeing a Philip K. Dick short story and seeing how science fiction, where we're at now, and how that might have been an influence in the past. If you've read this before, you simply want to comment on something I said, do so below. I'd love to have a conversation with you about this. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this short story or Philip K. Dick if they don't already know. And until then, I wish you the best luck in your weird and alien-filled travels. Farewell.